Now we would like to invite Peter to come and tell us the story of Easter.
To properly tell the story of Easter with all of its beauty and light, we need to touch on the darkness that came before. But the darkness, as in any good story, is only there to show us how great and beautiful the light is. So don't be afraid. At the beginning of our story, Jesus has died. He was crucified Friday afternoon, and by Friday evening, all the disciples were gathered together in a secret room in Jerusalem. They were shattered men. All their dreams of his triumph and his kingdom, all had come crashing down. It just all seemed like foolish fantasies now. Their master was gone. In their hearts, they felt an emptiness that they were sure could never be filled. All day Saturday, they stayed in that room. The shutters were drawn tight, the door was locked, a heavy gloom filled the air. And they thought back to their last supper with him, and they could see now that there had been a sadness in his eyes that they hadn't seen before, but they could see it now. And after the dinner, he had washed their feet. He had washed their feet like a servant. And late in the night, they stepped out into the streets of Jerusalem and walked out of the city to the Garden of Gethsemane. And that's where the soldiers had come and taken Jesus. And the disciples had run away. They had run. Oh, to live that one moment over again. To stay and be taken with him, or to fight as best they could, even to die there in the garden, anything. But to be here now knowing that the last thing that they had done was run away and leave him to die a cold and cruel death. The sad hours passed slowly that Saturday, broken only by the various duties of the Sabbath, for they were all devout Jews. The women were aware of another task that came to them. On Friday, there hadn't been enough time to prepare Jesus' body for burial before sundown, and sundown marked the beginning of the Sabbath, and such tasks were not permitted on the Sabbath. And so they made plans to go out at first light Sunday morning and go out to the tomb where he had been laid, which was held in a small garden outside of the city. And so it was that early Sunday morning, a small group of women stepped out onto the streets of Jerusalem. They whispered occasionally to one another as they made their way, wrapped in their shawls, just as the first light hit the tops of the highest domes and pinnacles in the city. But it wasn't until they came to the gates of Jerusalem that they remembered, what about the stone? There had been a giant stone that had been rolled in front of the tomb to close it. It had taken several Roman soldiers to roll it into place. How were they going to roll it away? But seeing as they were almost there, they continued on. And as they stepped into that little garden, everything became quiet. The sunlight now was glistening on the dew, on the grass, and on the leaves of the trees. The birds, the insects, even the wind. Everything was still. Their hearts were beating a little faster now, and they came up around a corner, and there they could see the tomb, and the stone was rolled away. They came up to the tomb and looked inside, and it was illuminated by that early light of the morning sun. And they stepped into the outer chamber, and from there they could look into the inner chamber where his body had been laid. And it was empty. And suddenly they turned around because they felt a presence behind them, and there on either side of the opening of the tomb were two angels, shining brilliantly. And one of them spoke to them and said, "Why seek ye the living among the dead? He is not here. Don't you remember when you were in Galilee? He told you that he would be taken into the hands of sinful men, but on the third day would rise. He is risen." Fear and awe moved the women to panic, and they ran from the tomb and through the garden, their long garments flowing behind them, back into the city, into the room where the disciples were gathered. And there they told their astonishing tale. The stone had been rolled away. Jesus wasn't there, but they had seen angels. They'd said he is risen. But the disciples, steeped as they were in their gloom, for the most part didn't believe a word of it. But there glimmered a light in the eyes of Peter. Could it be, he thought, could it possibly be? Slowly he got to his feet, and John rose also. They looked at each other, and a sign passed between them. And together they ran from the room, out the city streets, out the gates of Jerusalem, and out to the garden. John easily outran Peter, who was older and heavier. And he got to the tomb first. And he looked inside. But some fear of the unknown kept him from entering. He heard Peter coming up behind him and turned and gave him a look of wonder and uncertainty. Peter knew no such fear. He ran into the tomb and into the inner chamber, and there he saw that it was empty. The slab where Jesus had been laid only had the burial linens folded neatly and placed there. They ran back to tell the others, and as they were running out of the garden, they passed Mary Magdalene, who had been following at a distance. She saw them run by, their eyes wide with wonder, their mouths agape. She continued on slowly to the tomb and stepped inside and into the inner chamber. And there the tears that she had been holding back came forth. And after a time, she looked up, and there on the slab where Jesus had been laid were two angels. And one of them spoke to her and said, "Woman, why do you weep?" "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where I can find him." She stumbled out of the tomb, and there she beheld another figure. But because of the tears in her eyes and the sunlight shining behind him, she could not tell, nor did she greatly care who it was. But he spoke to her and said, "Woman, why do you weep? Who are you looking for?" And she replied, "Sir, if you have taken him, please lead me to where you have laid him, and I will come and take him away." And there was a long pause, and then he said, "Mary." "Master," she breathed, and she fell to her knees, for she knew instantly it was Jesus. She reached out her hand to touch him, but he said, "Touch me not, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go and tell the others that I will come to them." And so it was that Jesus did appear to the disciples in his physical form, but his whole body was radiant with light. In his presence, they felt waves of divine power and love washing over them. His robes were as if woven with living light. And he spoke to them. He said, "Peace be with you. All power has been given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore to all nations and share what I have taught you. For lo, I am with you always, even unto the ends of the earth." And the disciples came to realize that that light that Jesus had brought into the world was growing stronger and brighter in them. And as they shared that light with all, they became more and more like him. And if you call to him deep in your heart, that light will grow stronger and stronger in you as well.
Well, before I begin sharing more formally, I guess, I want to thank so many people, the choir, for the remarkable performance. It will be online, I'm sure, soon, and I really encourage all of you to watch and listen to it. It was a gift, not just in that moment of time, but a gift to the world. And I also want to thank the Expanding Light staff for hosting everyone, and the beautiful over at the Crystal Hermitage Gardens, those who have created the gardens and who are welcoming our guests there. We're having record numbers of visitors. Every year they get more and more. So thank all of you who are doing the parking and the greeting and all the different aspects that requires. So I want to begin. This is a beautiful talk that Master gave, or not, I think he wrote it rather than spoke it. It's his Easter message from 1934. It's called Resurrect in Me. Resurrect me in thee. Resurrect me in thee. Teach me to resurrect my soul from beneath the tomb of false pleasures into thy everlasting happiness. Teach me to resurrect my wisdom from beneath the debris of ignorance. Bless me to awaken my divine sympathy from beneath the shroud of selfishness. Command my soul to rise from the sepulchre of littleness into thy vastness. Teach me to lift my matter-caged soul into omnipresent freedom in thee. Bless me that I may bring my soul out of the gloom grave of evil into the light of perpetual goodness. Awaken me that I may arise from beneath the tomb of flesh into the consciousness of my cosmic body. From beneath the soil of sorrow, take my buried soul up unto thy joyous self. Teach me to resurrect myself from dogmatism to everlasting life in wisdom. Help me to extricate my soul from the bodily clod and make it omnipresent in thee. Resurrect my divine love from beneath the mound of attachment. Resurrect my consciousness from beneath the sepulchre of ever-thirsty, mad, earthly desires into the omnipresent, ever-abiding, ever-satisfying Christ peace within me. Even as Jesus resurrected himself in 3 days, so bless me that in a short time I may resurrect myself forever from beneath the tomb of all my bad habits into the freedom of Christ's wisdom in me. Pluck the lotus of my devotion from the mire of earthly forgetfulness and wear it on thy breast of ever-awake memory. Resurrect me in thee. So that builds a transition, doesn't it, between the story of the resurrection and that Peter so beautifully shared to a more yogic approach. Because Master's, Guruji's mission was to build bridges between East and West, between the basic teachings of Hinduism and Christianity, to show there are really, underneath, there's a profound similarity. And his wonderful book that has drawn countless people to a spiritual life, Autobiography of a Yogi, the original title of that was Yogi Christs of India. And so he was showing that the yogis and the Christ consciousness, it's what yoga leads to is Christ consciousness, not as a person, but as a state of consciousness. And to remember that Christ is one of our line of gurus. He isn't just belonging to the Christians, he belongs to the world. And to understand that when he came, he was already a liberated yogi. At his birth, Master tells us the 3 wise men that came were Sri Yukteswar, Lahiri Mahashaya, and Babaji in another incarnation. And when he was 13, there are the lost years of Jesus. Well, there are recordings in monasteries in Tibet and in northern India how someone came, they called him Yesu, Isa, and he came and he studied with them, and he became a great liberated yogi. So it's important to remember that, because the time he took his life, I put that wrong, the time he lived his life that is recorded in the Bible and throughout time since then, he knew what was coming. He knew that people would not understand. He came in a dark time in human history, and he knew his teachings were way beyond, way above what people could understand and appreciate. He knew they would be a threat to the established church and both to the Roman authoritarianism and the Jewish teachings, that he was shaking the establishment with his teachings, and he knew where it would end. But he was a yogi Christ, and he chose that life. And so we need to emphasize it's easy to go to, oh, how could people do that? How could they stone him and beat him and torture him and crucify? But that isn't really the point. People are foolish. They do foolish things. But the yogi Christ transcend them. And they came knowing where it was going to go. And he could have prevented it, but he was showing not just the people there, but he was showing for the rest of time what a yogi Christ can do. You know, if you're trying to, and he was showing his disciples what you can become by the resurrection. It doesn't end with people's cruelty and hatred and foolishness. That life can always transcend that. And just as we're going to have we've heard beautiful music, we'll have more beautiful music. But when a master musician is trying to train his students, or an accomplished dancer is trying to train the students, the young dancers that are learning, he'll perform a difficult piece, or he'll dance a very challenging piece of choreography, and then he'll turn to the students and say, okay, now you try. Me? Yes, you try. I've been in that position myself, and you can't accomplish what the master did, but you can try your best. And that's what the whole crucifixion and resurrection was about, to show the human potential that you can transcend. You can be up there on the cross and you can say, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And Christ was showing the master lesson of what the yogi can do. We can transcend the suffering, because the suffering will come to each and every soul until they find freedom. Why? Is God cruel? Does he enjoy watching suffering? No. We have karma. We have to work out our karma. And that karma is not worked out easily. We can't just say, oh yeah, okay, forget about that. Forget about that bad habit. We have to look at it, and we have to work with it, and it will cause suffering, and it will cause pain. And we can't just say, the ordinary person can say, oh boy, it was not my fault, it was their fault that this bad karma is coming to me. I remember I had these two friends in high school. One was a wise woman. I think she had a lot of yogic tendencies in her. And the other was nice but foolish. And the foolish one had a lot of health crises. And one time we were visiting her in the hospital, and she was saying, why me? Why is this happening to me? And my wise friend said very lovingly, why not you? But the worldly person thinks all the fault is outside. But the yogi thinks, this is my karma. That's why Christ said, Master explained, if someone slaps you, turn the other cheek. He wasn't saying be a martyr, be passive. He was saying, if your karma's coming, bring it on and let me work it out. And that's what the yogis do. That's what we do. When I say the yogis, this room is filled with yogis. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have yogic memories, yogic samskars within you. And so it's our job to look at the karma that's coming and proceed through it without self-pity, without self-justification, with courage, and with joy. Because joy, Master said, or Swami said, joy is the solution to every problem. So whatever comes to you, you can say, I can do this. I can do this. You know, right now at the Expanding Light, they've had in the kitchen, they've had a lot of work, because we have the two people visiting the tulip gardens. They're having 100 extra people a day come for lunch, and they're having to prepare these meals, and now the big Easter fest, and the stoves broke down. And they're doing their best to they may be up and running by now, but they were broken a few days ago. They're doing their best to keep going, keep making this food to feed the people. It reminds me of an Easter long ago here. This temple did not exist then. The Expanding Light was being built, but we didn't have the kitchens yet. So for Sunday service, Swami would give Sunday service in the temple over there. We call the teaching temple now. And then the cooks would cook up at the meditation retreat, because that kitchen was working, and they would have to bring the lunch down for, several hundred people. And I remember one Easter, they would bring down these big, pans. I forget what they're called, but you know what I'm talking about. And in the back of a pickup truck, and the cooks would be holding on to the side, and the driver would be driving. And one time they went over a bump and someone lost their balance, and boom, they stepped right in the middle of the casserole. And so they served it, and there was a big boot print right in the middle of the casserole. But we did it. There was joy. And there wasn't, this is impossible, we can't do it. And so we need to remember that every karmic test, every grief, every wrong has its ending in song, and that is the truth. Ananda, those of us who have been with us, been part of Ananda from the beginning, believe me, there were a lot of tests that we went through, but with Swami Kriyananda leading the charge toward God, it didn't seem that hard. I mean, being burnt to the ground, having lawsuits, having all these things that happened, always a shortage of resources, of money and so forth. But there was, in spite of all of that, we know, some of us were there was only joy. And so resurrection is about remembering that Christ, just as Christ went through that, and there was suffering on a physical plane, but it didn't touch his consciousness. And we need to remember that. That's how we go forward with our life. And we just keep moving in a way that allows us to find at the end, because at the end, just as Christ appeared, he was free, and he said to his disciples, "Peace be unto you." And that's what we will find at the end, that peace that transcends all understanding, that beautiful peace. And so this Easter, let it every day be an Easter. Let every day be the resurrection, where you say, I am born anew today. Maybe yesterday I didn't do as well as I could, but today I'll do better. And that constant rebirth, that's the story of the devotee's life. And in the end, Master promised that he would draw those he would be with the soul of each one who stayed with him. He would personally, he or one of the line of gurus, would usher them into the realms of light. So we need to understand, one last thought, our search for God it's not limited to our own experience. It's not limited to our own burning up our own karma, transcending. Every victory is for the whole world. Because just as the master, teacher or dancer or yogi can model for others how to do it, every victory we have that freedom we carry with us. And wherever we go, whoever we talk with, we can be talking about car mechanics, it doesn't matter, but that inner freedom and that joy we carry in our hearts. So especially now when people are confused and suffering and truth seems rather elusive, remember that this victory is not for ourselves alone, just as Christ's victory certainly wasn't for himself alone, but it was for all the world, and each one of us in our own little way can make a difference if we know how to approach life, if we don't lose our faith, we don't lose our courage. And it's in that beautiful chapter, that verse that we read from the Gita at the end, just he who has faith in me, he who has love for me, I will be with him, and he is very beloved to me. Remember, our efforts, God sees them, sees every victory and cheers us on, sees every failure and lifts us up until finally, as Swami said, our gladness in God is ever new. And we come to that light and we say, thank you, Master, for this life in God you have given me.
Life cannot die, only death can meet death. In Christ resurrected was the truth of Christ proved. In Christ resurrected was Christ's truth proved.
We couldn't clap during the concerts.
That was Jesus had shown his pure form. Upon a high mountain he stood, transfigured, 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 transfigured.
the treat that we have. Yesterday we were having tea with a friend, Ricardo Pez. He's a member of our community in Italy, in Assisi, near Assisi, along with his sister and mother. And he told us quite an amazing story.
This is Ricardo.
Yeah, this is Ricardo. Ricardo is an internationally known cellist and composer and goes all over the world. And yesterday he told us this story. There was a very, very beautiful and famous sycamore tree. It was so famous that it was one of the most photographed trees in the world. In Roman times, just about exactly 100 years after the passing of Jesus, the Romans also had taken over the British Isles, England. And because of the marauding tribes from the north, they built something called Hadrian's Wall. And it was in order to help protect the realm. So along Hadrian's Wall, several hundred years ago, there was a sycamore tree that began to grow. And it grew in such a place that became known as the Sycamore Gap because of the beauty of this tree. It was so beautiful, it was one of the most photographed trees in the world. It was even starred in the movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And so it was a very famous tree. In 2023, some vandals, they think of father and son, cut down that tree. And it was so loved by the population that there was a national mourning. Well, Ricardo also heard that story, and he loved England, loved the tree, and so he decided that he would write a lament for the tree in the Gaelic tradition. And he wrote it. He traveled from Rome to London during a train and bus strike and taxi strike.
With his cello.
With his cello. Made his way by train for 5 hours, managed somehow to get a ride to the trail that led to the tree, and then walked through the rain and the mud for 40 minutes in order to play his lament to the sycamore tree. And so now for us, he is going to play this original composition.
But the tree...
Oh yes, yeah.
You say.
Yeah, that's why there's such a resonance between Christ's resurrection, because from the stump of the tree, the new sprouts are growing. And so life cannot be taken away.
And they're taking cuttings and planting them all over, like the disciples.
Yeah. So
this is
the lament for the sycamore tree.
that he played in the rain, in the mud, next to the tree. And it's on YouTube if you want to watch it. It's beautiful.
So we'll take off the collection while we do.